Hello everyone, I'm Jeff Standley with Standley Handcrafted, and today we're going to be making candles with IGI 4627 Comfort Blend Wax. Now this is a full paraffin wax. It's extremely soft and it probably holds the most oil out of any wax that's out there. So 4627 is a wax that has the consistency, and I'll show some pictures of it here, has the consistency of like a real hard petroleum jelly. So like a jar of Vaseline that's like really tough. It's a really nice wax. It throws extremely well. And like I said, it does hold a lot of oil, up to 12%. But with the candles that we're gonna be making today, we're gonna be adding right around like 8% on this one. So we're gonna go down just a little bit. For me personally, I feel that adding too much oil, it kind of works in the opposite direction. You don't necessarily get a stronger scent throw by adding more oil. So I've found with pretty much any wax that I use, adding a little bit less, so right around like 8 or 9% for most waxes, I get a much better hot throw than I do adding 11 or 12%. And then in today's video, we're gonna be using vessels from 1617. Now these are right around like a 9-ounce vessel. So we're gonna pick a bunch of different colors in these. We're gonna go ahead and fill these up, and I'm gonna be trying 2 different wicks with this wax. And if you're just now jumping into candles and this is your first video, you definitely wanna pay attention to the wick that goes into your vessels. Not every single candle wick that you get, like if you were to buy a set off of Amazon, it may not work depending on the vessel that you've purchased. So it's definitely a good idea to take a look around, and I'll include Candle Science's wick guide, which is probably one of the best ones out there, and they have a guide that shows you exactly what wicks to use for the wax that you're using in the size of the vessel that you're gonna be using. So for 4627, they recommend an LX wick. So we're gonna be using 2 different ones. We're gonna be using an LX, and I'm also gonna test this in a CD wick. And again, for anybody new to the channel, the 2 different wicks, they burn just a little bit different. Some wicks will actually curl over a little bit so that you get a little bit bigger flame. Some wicks are a little bit more rigid. They stand straight up so that you get a nice burn all the way down through the vessel. And of course, depending on the wick that you get, some can burn hotter than others. So you definitely wanna pay attention to that and do some research on wicks and waxes before you get started. So the method that we're gonna be doing to heat the wax today is a kind of a double boiler method without the saucepan to heat up the water. So I've got a hot plate here, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you that. And we're basically just gonna heat up the wax in a melting pitcher directly on the hot plate. Now, if you don't have a hot plate, I'll show you the double boiler method, which is what I started out with, and it's what a lot of people start out with. So what that is you're basically gonna take the melting pitcher and you're gonna put it in a pan with about 1 inch to 2 inches full of water. So that way the pitcher and the wax isn't on direct heat. Now I've got a hot pad here, which will kind of help heat the wax up without putting direct heat on the actual pitcher itself. So you definitely don't want to put the pitcher on a stove burner because it's gonna get way too hot. You're gonna burn your pitcher and you can scorch the wax. So as we jump into this one, I'll go ahead and show you both methods so that no matter what you have, you'll be able to do this. And for anybody following along, the wicks that I'm gonna be using are the LX16, the LX18, and the LX20. And then the CDs, I'm gonna be using the CD8, the CD14, and the CD16. And the vessel size that I'm gonna be using, if you did wanna follow along and get some of these are right around like 2.75 to 3 inches in diameter. And the reason I'm using 3 different wicks is because these are a vessel that I haven't used before, so I'm gonna put 3 different sizes in 3 different jars so that when we get the candles done and I go through and do testing, I can see which of those 3 wicks, or actually 6 wicks in this video, so that I can see which one burns the best and creates the best melt pool at the end. And for those new to the channel, the melt pool is basically the melted wax that's in the candle. So when they say good melt pool or bad melt pool, what they're referring to is when you burn a candle, you want the melted wax to be anywhere from, you want the melted wax to be almost edge to edge, if not edge to edge, and right around 1/4 inch. If the melted wax gets to about 1/2 inch, you've got a wick that's too big and it's burning through the candle way too fast. If after burning the candle for 3 hours, the melted wax does not go from edge to edge and you're getting a little bit of buildup on the sides, you've got a wick that's too small for the candle and it can eventually extinguish itself out. So we're gonna go ahead and jump down here. I'm gonna go ahead and start weighing out the wax. We're gonna start placing our wicks, and I'm gonna show you exactly how to go through this. All right, so for this one, we're gonna be using these jars from 1617. We're gonna go ahead and fill 6 of these today. I don't know exactly how much wax or which wick is gonna work in these, so we're gonna try a few different ones. So what I'm gonna do for these is we're gonna be using the LX wicks from Candle Science, and then I've also got some CD wicks from Candle Science. And we're gonna put 3 different LX in 3 of these and 3 different CDs in 3 of these. So for these, since I don't know which is which, I'm gonna go ahead and use the LX16, the LX18, and the LX20. And then for the CDs, I've got a CD8, a CD14, and a CD16. And just so we know which wick is gonna go into these, I'm using the stickers from the Ultimate Candle Book. So to make sure that we get the right stuff in these, and we're gonna go ahead and label these jars with the wax and the wicks, I'm using the Ultimate Candler's Workbook. I have a link to this in the video description down below. So I'm gonna go ahead, and it's always a good idea to label your jars so that when you're doing testing, you know exactly what you're burning and how much you're burning and what wick you're gonna be using. So we're gonna do an LX 16-in-1. The wax is 4627. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and label each of these. Go ahead and get the rest of these out of the way. And then for each of these, I'm gonna go ahead and drop the wick down in here. And then we'll go ahead and do this next one. It's gonna be the CD8. The CD14. And the CD16. Now I've got a little bit more spacing on the CDs. I didn't have the CD12, which I wanted to try. So we're gonna do the 8, the 14, and the 16. And it's definitely gonna give us an idea. I think it might actually end up being a 12 or the 14, but we'll test that. And now that we've got those in there, we're gonna go ahead and stick the wicks down. I'm just gonna be using wick stickers on these. Normally I use red RTV to secure my wicks, and I'll go ahead and put a picture of that right here. I use red RTV, which is gasket adhesive. It can withstand heat up to over 400 degrees, and it will definitely, it's the best thing to put on your wicks to stick them to the bottom, and they will not move. Since I'm only doing testing on these, I'm just gonna go ahead and stick them with the wick stickers, which do work well, but they have a tendency to slip every once in a while. So this is more of just a burn test. So I'm gonna go ahead and peel these. And I've got a pen casing here, which will let you hold the wick and actually get a grip on that, get some stability on that so that you can actually center it in the middle of your jar. And peel those. And then just push that in the center just a little bit to make sure it's nice and stuck. Go ahead and set those aside. And then we'll stick these. And this pen casing makes a huge difference when you're trying to stick wicks, especially down in real narrow containers. I've got big hands, so trying to get my hands in the middle of that to push that wick down is a real pain. So that pen casing makes a huge difference. And this is just a regular Bic pen, and I just took the pen components out of it, and it's just the casing. All right, so that's pretty much it with this one. We're gonna go ahead and set these aside, and we're gonna figure out exactly how much wax goes into these so that we can weigh it out in our pitcher and then start melting it down. All right, so if you're using new vessels, you don't know exactly how much wax to put in this or how much melted wax to put in this. So the best way to do this is gonna be using the water method. And what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna take your jar, and I've already done it for this one, so I know exactly how much goes in these, but if it's a new vessel, you wanna put your empty vessel on a scale. You're gonna tear it out so that it comes up at 0, and then you're gonna go ahead and fill your vessel all the way to the top, or where you want a finished candle to end, which is gonna be right up towards the top, just down from the top just a little bit, probably about 90% of the way up. You're gonna fill it with water, and you're gonna weigh how much water is inside here. And for this one, I'll go ahead and put the measurements off to the side right here so that you can see that, so you know exactly what method I'm doing. So when I filled this one, it filled up to 9.5 ounces of water. So as far as weight, when we're done with this, your total weight is going to be 9.5 ounces, and that's going to be wax and oil combined. So what we're going to do with this one is we have to make a calculation for the water and the wax, because wax and water, although they weigh the same, the volume is very different. The density of wax is very different than the density of water. And what that means is if you were to put 9.5 ounces of water in this and 9.5 ounces of wax in this one, the two levels are going to be very different. The water is going to go up all the way to the top, and the wax would actually overflow from this one. So we have to take that into consideration. And what we're going to do with this one, and I'm going to go ahead and put the calculation up right here. We're going to take 9.5 ounces of water, and we're going to multiply that by 0.85. And that's going to be the difference to take into consideration the density or the volume of the wax in relation to the water. And that comes out to 8.075 ounces. And like I said, so what that means is if you were to fill this with water, it's 9.5 ounces. And if you were to fill this with wax, the volume would go all the way to the same level as the water, but the weight is going to be 8.07. But then once we get the weight of the wax for one of these, we also need to take into consideration the oil that's going to be going in here also. So if you were to put, so this is going to come out to a total weight of 8.07, but we haven't added the oil yet, so we need to take into consideration the wax and the oil combined is going to be 8.07. And we've got another calculation on that one. So what we want to do is you want your end weight to be 8.07, but we're going to go ahead and add 8% oil in this one. So what you want to do is you're going to take that oil, 8.07, and you're going to divide it by 1.08. So you're going to come up with 7.47, and that's going to be the wax amount that goes into each of these, and the difference is going to be your oil. So since we're filling 6 of these, we're going to take 7.47 and we're going to multiply that by, so you multiply that by 6, you're going to come up with 44.86. We're going to go ahead and call that 44.9, which means when we weigh out our wax in the pitcher, we're gonna go ahead and weigh this out to 44.9 ounces. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab the wax, and we're gonna go ahead and fill this up. Now, if you haven't worked with 4627 before, it's extremely messy. This is not a process I like, but it is a very good wax. It has an incredibly strong hot throw. But if you've never seen this wax before, it has the consistency, and you can push on it right there. You can see that. It's got the consistency of a really thick or hardened petroleum jelly. So like a big thing of hardened Vaseline. So we're gonna go ahead and cut this open. I'm gonna go ahead and get a little bit of a shot of this. Now with 4627, because it is so messy, if you've got gloves for this, I would definitely say get some gloves, because this stuff will get absolutely everywhere. All right, so I've got a metal scoop on this one. I'm gonna try to get this out and weigh it with making as little mess as possible. And we're gonna go ahead, like I said, we're gonna weigh out 44.9 ounces. And like I said, this wax is extremely messy, but it is worth it because it does have such a strong hot throw. And we are getting into kind of a word of warning or word of caution on this wax. It is really soft, so if you're selling candles with this wax, it can definitely be a problem shipping during the hot months of the summer. All right, there's 44.8, 44.9. So I'm gonna clean this up a little bit, and then we're gonna go ahead and melt this down. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this over on the hot plate here. We're gonna turn this up to probably about midway, maybe just over half to 3/4. And we're gonna go ahead and melt that down, and we're gonna go ahead and let that heat up to around 185, 190 degrees. We're gonna go ahead and weigh out our oil. And to figure out your oil, we're gonna go ahead and take that 44.9 and we're gonna multiply it by 0.09, which is gonna come out to 4 ounces, which is gonna come out to 4.04 ounces. So we're gonna be adding just over 4 ounces of oil in this. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna be using Jamaica Me Crazy, which is a nice tropical scent. I normally use cinnamon to try everything, to try in new waxes, just because I love cinnamon and it's such a strong scent, but it's springtime right now, so we're gonna go for a little bit more of a spring summer scent. And we're gonna go ahead and weigh out just over 4 ounces. I don't think I'm gonna get 4 in this. So there's 3 ounces. Oh, I think I might get 4 in this. Okay, so just over 4 ounces, and we're gonna go ahead and set that aside. And we're gonna let this wax heat up to 185, 190 degrees. We're gonna pull it off, let it start to cool down, and then we'll add our oil. So we'll be adding our oil probably around 180 degrees. And that is Fahrenheit, and I'll go ahead and put the Celsius conversion on the video as well. Okay, so I pulled this one off. It actually went up to around 200 degrees, which is perfectly fine with this wax. With most waxes, honestly, you can take them up quite a bit before you ever start to damage the wax. So this one is just now starting to cool down. We're gonna go ahead, pull this, and we're gonna add the oil. Stir it pretty good for probably a good minute or so. And if I calculated all this right, it should fill each of these jars perfectly to about 90% of the way up. Stir kind of vigorously so that it actually binds that oil to the wax. And with the wax being this hot, it's gonna bind pretty easily, so you really don't have to stir for that long. And we're gonna go ahead and start pouring these. Then I usually take them up to about 3/4 of the way, and then I'll go back through and top each one of them off. And we'll go through, make sure these are up. And that is it. Perfectly weighed out. Go ahead and grab this so that you can see how far up each of those are. And every single one of those, I filled the water probably a little too high on these, but I wanted to take into consideration the wax is going to shrink down a little bit, so they won't be clear to the top like that. But every single one of those filled all the way to the top. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab some wick holders for each of these, and we're gonna go ahead and place these, and we're gonna let them sit. All right, and I don't have any wick holders for these, so I'm gonna use the good old trusty chip clips. And again, I do have a link to these in the video description down below. I just get these off Amazon, and they work great for wick clips. Go ahead and center each of those, snap them in. And then we're gonna go ahead and let those sit. So that's it with the first round of testing. We went through, I burned it for just over 3 hours, and then I went ahead and blew those out like you just saw in the video. And I think we've definitely narrowed down the wicks to try. And then from here, we would basically go on, place those 2 wicks, which would be the CD8, and then I'm gonna guess the LX14. Since the 16 mushroomed a little bit, it had a little bit of wax on here. This one is actually burning really well, as you can see in the video, but I would probably still go down 1 on this one. And you can definitely see in the video that the LX mushroomed a lot worse than the CD wicks did. The CD wicks handled a little bit better as far as mushrooming, but you will get some better burning from the LX wicks if you went down from like the LX16 to the LX14. Now I do have a little bit more testing to do in this one. I'm gonna let these burn, and I'll probably do another follow-up video where I go into and show the full burn of these candles. What I wanna do, and I usually do this in a lot of my candles to test, I usually pour the wax about 3/4 of the way down so that I get past that first initial burn, which usually doesn't create a full melt pool. And I wanna get the wick to burn right about 3/4 to halfway down so that it also heats up inside of the vessel. And of course, if this is your first time making candles, you definitely want to burn a candle from top to bottom so that you can see how it burns, because a candle and how it burns at the very top is gonna be very different to how it burns at the bottom. And then of course, once you start getting into a tapered vessel, and I'll go ahead and post an image here of what a tapered vessel looks like, those can get very different, because a good melt pool up at the top may not necessarily translate into a good melt pool down at the bottom with those. So with these candles here, I would definitely burn the CD8 all the way down just to see how well it gets. And I think this one would do probably the best out of the CD8s, just because there is a little bit of a buildup around the edges up here, but it's not enough to where as it goes down further, it's gonna drown itself out. I think the CD8 and further testing with this one will show that the CD8 is probably perfect for this vessel. And then of course, if you're gonna transition that into like a 9-ounce straight jar or a jelly jar, which is what I commonly use and what's commonly used kind of throughout the candle community, you'd probably go down to the CD6 for that one. And when it comes to the LX, I would definitely go down. I'm gonna burn the 16 all the way down just to see what that one does, but I think it's still gonna be a little bit too much, especially once it gets halfway down the vessel and it starts to heat up that vessel and get a little bit warmer in there. I think the melt pool, while it's perfect right now for the first top of the candle, I think it's gonna be a little bit too much as it gets from the middle all the way down to the bottom. And as much as I give this wax a bad time for being messy, it is a really nice wax. And I'm gonna go ahead and show you the tops of these now that they've cooled. The 4627 is probably one of the nicest waxes to work with when it comes to pouring, what it looks like beforehand and what it looks like after a burn. Every single one of these tops, and again, I'll go ahead and show the video here, every single one of these tops, probably a good hour after they've solidified, after I blew them out, they look perfect all the way across. They went through, they settled really nicely. It's not like a 464 or a 6006 where they can dip a little bit, and especially with 464, you can get some like real cratered tops where it looks like asphalt, like a road. The 4627, because it's so soft, it has a chance to kind of melt and kind of settle evenly across the whole top of the candle. So like I said, I do give this wax a really hard time for being so messy. It's easily the messiest of all the waxes I've ever tried, but once you get past that initial mess of getting the wax from the bag into the pitcher and you pour it into a candle, you really can't beat it. It's a really nice wax. It's definitely one that you should try out just because the scent throw is so strong with this stuff. Now I will say this wax is definitely not meant for melts. I've poured it in melts just to do some testing to see what it looks like, but it's way too soft for something like that. So if you did want to use this wax in some type of a melt, you would need to mix it with something. And you can mix it with a little 464 so that you can get a little bit stronger scent throw from the soy, but you will make the soy even softer than it already is. So if you were wanting to use 4627 in a melt, you would probably need to mix it with 4625 because it's such a hard wax. But again, that's pretty much it with this one. If you want to see the ebook that I've created on this one, so if you're the type of person that doesn't want to follow along the videos, I have created an ebook that goes through and talks about everything, the wicks, the jars, basically everything we did in this video, including the temperatures and the measurements and the ratios. I have that ebook listed on my website at stanleyhandcrafted.com, along with all of the other ebooks which cover a bunch of different waxes, from soy to joy wax to coconut soy to 6006. So if this is not the wax that you want to work with, I do have books on all the other waxes. And of course, as always, if I glossed over something or missed something in this video that you wanted to see more of, please let me know in the comment section down below and I'll try to go through and answer all of those. And then of course, if I did miss anything in this one, like I said, I'm going to do a follow-up video with this one and show kind of the burns all the way through these. So if you do have any questions that I missed in this video, I'll try to update those questions in the next video. And of course, in the meantime, please subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, and click the bell notification so that you know when new videos are launched. And you can also follow me on any of the social media platforms that I've listed in the video description down below: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, my website, and the phone number if you want to sign up for any of the text alerts. And that number is 253-303-7968. And we'll see you in the next video.